Hello, lovelies. This is editor Lauren, and I am an author's best friend. And I'm here today with my author best friend, my bestie, Sierra Spencer. Sierra, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a drink that is colloquially known as a bramble cocktail, but in the book that we got it from, it's called Heart of Dark Mist, I think is what it's called. It's very good.
A bramble cocktail. What is in that?
You'd have to ask my husband. I don't know. I know the lemon is involved. I think it's like a spin on a Cosmo. So whatever one would put in.
It looks sophisticated.
It's so yummy.
Well, it's taco night in my household, so I'm having a Pacifico. And in true ABF fashion, we like to start with sharing what we're drinking so we can have a little cheers to a fun conversation. So cheers, Sierra.
Cheers.
All right. Well, Sierra Spencer is the author of 2 books, Developing Feelings and Troped, and her baby is being born tomorrow, Eastern Standard. Release day, up and coming. We're here with all of the high energy, super excited for tomorrow. Eastern Standard is set in a small town, and it tells a super cute but gut-wrenching, feet-kicking story about Whit and Olivia, 2 people that are looking for permission from other people to be together. Permission that they're just, not going to get. And so I want to hear all about what's going on with you, lady. How are you feeling? Are you excited? Are you anxious? Are you nervous? It's not your first release, so it's not your first rodeo, but how are you feeling?
I feel good about this release. I don't feel anxious like I did before Developing Feelings. And yeah, I feel like I'm just excited for Olivia and Whit to sort of be in the world again. I say again because I had the opportunity to have a bunch of ARC readers for this release, and those ARC readers have seemed to like it. And so I'm excited to release it out into the broader public. Yeah, I'm just excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I was thinking, I don't forget that it's not out, but there's been so much gush about it coming out recently. I feel like all of the ARC readers kind of banded together and were like, we're all going to read it in the next 72 hours. And so there's been lots of fun comments and reviews coming in, and it's just going to be a long series of this after the book comes out, which is really exciting. And so, like you said, this is not your first one, but this is your first one that you chose to work with a PR company. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what motivated you to do that for that one or for this one, and what that experience has been like.
Yeah, I worked with Good Girls PR. Shay and Lindsay are 2 really amazing gals to work with. They have so much knowledge about how releases work and content, and it was such a dream to work with them. I wanted to work with a PR company this time around because for my first 2 releases, Developing Feelings, the decision to make it a real book happened very quickly. And same thing with Troped. It was sort of like I wrote Developing Feelings, and then I wrote Troped with Mina Miles, and we just were like, okay, let's put it out and not do any marketing, not be what we are now. And so I decided for Eastern Standard, I wanted to sort of put all of my eggs in one basket and really try the whole gambit of getting a release, marketed and publicized and all those things. And I knew a lot about how to write a book, and I knew a lot about how to publish it and format it in the way that I wanted, and all of those things, but I knew less about what makes a marketable book. Some of that information comes along with creating content and trying to figure out what people like and what the algorithm likes and all of those things. But there were some things that I didn't want to try to start from scratch during this release. And one of those things was ARC readers. And so I had Shay and Lindsay handle my ARC readers, and that was such a great investment. And I also had Lindsay do a social pool for me. It was so fun to get that document from her. When we got it, Lauren and I were in our office, and we were just squealing the whole time about all of the quotes you pull, because when you're writing a book, it's sort of you have your favorite lines, and your author's best friend has their favorite lines, but to have someone totally unrelated to the project at all read it and say these are some of my favorite quotes, it's so fun. And it's fun, and it helped me think about the way that I was producing content for that book, and so that was really helpful too. And yeah, so that was my decision to work with Good Girls PR, and it was great. They were great.
And how do you feel about the ARC readers that you've experienced? Has it felt overwhelming I think you got something 200 people that agreed to read it, which is crazy. That feels like a mini release. It's a soft launch, so to speak.
Soft launching, yeah.
Yeah. So what was that like to slowly start, you've done the launches before where it's just kind of out in strangers' hands, but now you have people that are like really rooted in the book community, and this is sort of like this is like their part-time job is to be reading books. What was that like to see all of those comments coming in?
That was probably the most nervous I had been, right? Where it's like, if you put out this book and you give it to a bunch of ARC readers and the majority of them don't like it, that's a problem. And so I was just like really anxious, because when you just like throw out a book and you're like, here, it's published, people can buy it, read it if they want, it's sort of like, well, that's the product, and if they don't like the product, then that's fine. But getting ARC readers is sort of this strange place where if you get a lot of bad reviews, you might be inclined to just say, like, I have to push back this release, like I have to rewrite something, a storyline didn't work when I had, beta readers read it or whatever it is. And so I think probably what actually happened here is like, I'm not anxious about the Eastern Standard release because I was already anxious about the ARC release. And so that's good and bad. And I'm glad that the ARC readers liked it. But yeah, it's a little terrifying getting a new product out there and having people read it for the first time.
I do a lot of Goodreads review stalking for the podcast, and I feel like something I've noticed is that if you are going to read your reviews, you have to sort of do a little detective work to figure out why exactly, particularly if you're going to read your bad reviews or your reviews that are, 3 stars or under, you need to do a little bit of detective work to figure out exactly why they didn't like it. Because I was sort of surprised to find that there are quite a few people who give low ratings for just tropes that they don't like, or like things that just didn't really resonate with them, and not necessarily because it's bad. And that isn't always super clear in the comments or like in the review itself. And you can kind of pick it up by the fact that they just like, they tell you what the book is about, but it's not like, oh my God, there were so many typos, or the plot didn't really connect, or like this book was all over the place. It's just kind of like, this was this thing and this thing. And you're like, oh, okay. So you just don't like enemies to lovers. Like that's why you gave it 2. And not that the book is bad. It's just not your favorite trope. So
yeah, it's hard, right? Like as a consumer of books, like, right, I'm an author, but I'm also just like, I read a lot of books, and I don't often look at the reviews before I read a book because I know how subjective they are. Like if I see a book a lot on social media, or I see a book a lot on TikTok, whether it's like reviewed positively or negatively, if it's just like in my everyday like scrolling on social media, then I'm probably like going to read it. Or if it's recommended to me by somebody I know, or yeah, I've talked about this before on the Likewise podcast, but like microtropes actually get me quite a bit. Like if you post something on social media with like a quote or a scene or whatever, I'm just going to read it. Probably in that moment, I will just pause what I'm doing and download it on Kindle Unlimited or whatever. And I don't really look at the reviews until after I've read it. And so I try to think that way when somebody's talking to me about my reviews, or when I'm needing to look at my reviews for one reason or another. I'm thinking about like, people are going to read this anyway, even if there's like a 2-star or a 3-star. It's just like, it wasn't for them. And that's fine.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Maybe also hot tip for any of our indie authors listening. What was the gap in between when you finished the book and like when you started planning what your release was going to look like? Because that's a lot of work, like planning content and like planning out the timelines. And you did this before you had a PR company to help you with it. But like, how long did you usually try to give yourself before the book is ready to go, so you can kind of plan out how you're going to release it?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think that I would recommend probably everyone just pick a date. Pick a date they want their book to come out and work backwards from that. Because if you don't, you could spend forever on your book. You could spend forever on marketing. You could spend forever on anything, really, like commissioning art or designing a book cover or all those things. And for, I think, all of my releases, it has worked this way, where I've just said, we want the book out on this date, and then what are the things we have to do to make that happen? Knowing that, we could push that date as long as the release date hasn't been, released to the public yet. And that's how we planned out when to send ARCs. That's how we planned out when to send out PR packages, when to have editing done by, when to have cover reveals, and things like that. And I think actually I did Eastern Standard slightly earlier than we needed to, but I had actually anticipated spending more time writing writing it than I did, and I ended up finishing it maybe a month or so before, and it was just because I thought it would take more time to do some of the other things like setting up PR packages and stuff like that, but that wasn't the case. So that was nice, but it also meant that I was marketing earlier than I needed to be, and sometimes that's a bad thing because you're running out of content. Like you have all these ideas, and then now you maybe like closer to your release, you're feeling like you're reusing a lot of them. But I think people should be okay with reusing content, especially if there's been like a gap in between them, right? One thing that people tell you all the time is like reuse content that works, like change the font, change the photos you're using. But like if a TikTok or an Instagram post does well, just like try it in a different font, and see if it does well again. And so that's what this release probably taught me the most, is like, if you give yourself enough time, you can experiment with a lot of different posts and just see what's working for you at that time. And that was really useful.
I wish we could do a poll. We'll do a poll that obviously is going to happen much later than this is released. But I wonder if readers like the slow burn of a release. Like, oh, wow, this book comes out in a month. Like, I'm excited. Or if they're like, oh, crap, like I have to wait a whole month before I get to see all of this stuff they're teasing me with. Like, I'd rather you just like tease it for a week straight and then I get the book. I wonder what people think about that. I forget about them. I'm really bad about adding stuff to my TBR, so that's my problem.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really bad at that too. Like if I see a TikTok that's like, here's this book and it's coming out in like 6 months, I'm like, I hope I see this again, because no way I'm going to remember it. And sometimes they're from like smaller indie authors on TikTok or Instagram, and they won't have like a link in bio or something that will take me to the Goodreads book or whatever. And so then it's like, well, now I can't even quickly add it to my Goodreads. And it's not their fault, because TikTok, unless you're registered as a business, you can't have a link in your bio until you hit 1,000 followers. And so like TikTok kind of screws you over in that way. But I feel like at this point, all authors should have a link in bio on their Instagram. It just makes it easier for people to find your book and to add it to Goodreads. As an author, I don't even know when the best time to start teasing your book is. Like, some people say that you should start teasing your book as soon as you decide that you're going to release it. And that is good advice. But if someone's really excited about it, maybe they'll follow you, but maybe they'll not do that, and then you have to continuously post about it. And trying to figure out like the balance between new stuff and old stuff is really hard. And so I don't know. I guess I don't know if there's a good answer for when to start doing it. Maybe there is. Maybe there's like a statistic that I'm not paying attention to that's like 3 months before your release, like do like an announcement that you're writing a book, then do a trope, and then do a cover reveal. And like, also there's so many like reveals. There's so many reveals between the time you're like, I'm writing this book, and then the time it comes out. It's like, I'm going to do a trope reveal. I'm going to do a micro trope reveal. I'm going to do a playlist reveal. I'm going to do a character reveal. And it feels like with that list, like you'll have content forever. But then you realize you have to post like 5 days a week or whatever. And maybe you don't have to post 5 days a week, but the algorithm's like when you're consistent. And what does consistent mean? Nobody knows. So, you know, it's like all vibes, really, I think is the summary of like a book release is like, you want to drop a cover reveal and the next day a playlist post? Go for it. It's all you.
All based on vibes. That's amazing.
Sometimes, I guess, yeah, the only thing I actually have to speak to that on is, like, sometimes I'll post a story and I'm like, hey, should I do this thing? And then, like, 5 minutes later, like, 7 people will be like, yeah, do that thing, 100% on the poll. And then I'm like, okay, I'll just go do that thing right now then. and then...
This is for you, 7.
And it's, like, the 7 people who, like, are so lovely and always like my things. And so I'm like, okay, just for you, 7. It's great.
What do you do on release day? Do you have a thing that you do, or like do you like sit and wait for comments and just stare at your phone all day, or do you go out and try to distract yourself? What do you do?
That's a good question. I think tomorrow, when my book comes out, I have not a lot of things to do, which is usually not the case. I do try to have things because otherwise I'll just like think about it all the time. And so it's actually kind of dangerous not to have things scheduled for tomorrow. There are a few things that will take up some time, but I think that when Troped came out, our department in grad school was having a like day-long event. And so I was there all day and I didn't have to think about it. And so when I came home, I got to see some of those reactions. And then I think something similar was happening when I released Developing Feelings. Like I had things planned, or it was just like a regular work day or something like that. We're still on break from grad school, so I don't have a lot of things to do tomorrow. And that's kind of scary, actually, now that I think about it.
Well, we'll have to find something for you to do then. We'll have to do something.
Yeah, it feels like an author's best friend sort of job, not the author's job.
Yeah. Perhaps this is a decoy question just to see how much you know. Time will tell. Stay tuned.
I hope your desired answer was I'm doing nothing.
Guys, call it off. She's so busy tomorrow. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes, because that's what everybody's here for. And by everybody, I mean me.
Do people say that?
What?
Like meat and potatoes?
Oh, I hope so. Unless my nightmare brain just made it up. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, meat and potatoes is like it's like the basics. Like, let's get to the heart, you know. You gotta have your meat and potatoes for your meal, and then everything else is just fluff.
People definitely say that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spencer, for the backup. I'm hip. I'm with it. The kids say meat and potatoes. Okay, meat and potatoes is Wit and Olivia. And, well, it's really just Eastern Standard, I guess. It's a cozy small town romance that, you know, everybody didn't know that they needed. And reading this book really transports you to a cozier time. Like, I'll chalk it up 100% to your writing. Like, it doesn't matter what the temperature is outside. Like, you want to get cozy. You want to have tea or coffee or some sort of warm comfort drink. And you want to have a blanket. And you're probably just imagining that it's Gilmore Girls playing out in your head. But did you have a space, a headspace that you got into, or like an aesthetic you set in your home or your office? Or like, how did you get yourself into the space to be able to make something so cozy on these pages?
I appreciate the use of cozy and not just like sad, because I feel like
cozy in like a shower cry kind of way.
I think, I don't know if I've talked about this before anywhere, but I started writing this book in my third year of grad school. And everyone who's ever been a PhD student who I know personally has told me that the third year is the hardest year. And I was like, no, it's not. Like, it will be fine. I'm done with all my classes and I'm just doing research and I get to, you know, do some writing and everything will be just fine. And then, I don't know, day one of third year starts and I feel miserable. I feel not motivated. And I feel like, I don't know, like nothing is going the way that I want it to. And so, I don't know, I started writing this book in April of my third year. So I'm well into my third year at this point. And I'm on this trip with my husband to a very cozy small town called Idlewild in California. And I'm thinking about like people who move to these small towns and like, do they just accept them? Like, do they like, you know, embrace them with open arms? Do they, maybe it depends on where they're coming from. Like if they're coming from another small town, maybe it's different. And then I thought about Gilmore Girls. And for people who haven't watched Gilmore Girls, Lorelai Gilmore, when she is a teenager, moves to this small town, and she was previously in Hartford, Connecticut, and she's wealthy and she comes from, you know, a lot of money, and she's moving there with basically nothing. And the town loves her and she's very likable. But like, what happens if she wasn't? And so that was sort of the starting place of Eastern Standard, which is like, what happens when you are trying something new and you're feeling really vulnerable and it's like not what you expected to happen, which was kind of, I guess it's just a giant metaphor for my third year where I was like, I think that this is what needs to happen and it will be okay. And then it wasn't. And it's not like anything terrible happened in my third year. I'm making it sound like something, you know, really awful happened to me in grad school, but it didn't. It was just really hard. And I think that that trickled in a lot. So when I'm writing those scenes that are like, one of the first scenes that I wrote is Olivia pulls out some of her husband's old things. And she's like just really sad. And that was one of the first scenes that I wrote. And it was just because I was feeling really sad. And I think that along the way of writing this book, like, I had this book that I was writing and I was really excited about it. I was really excited to tell these stories. So then it becomes this sort of like cozy transition. Like, yeah, you're in a small town, but there's lots of like melancholic undertones here, right? Like, the town doesn't like Olivia. Her husband died. Whit has, liked Olivia for a long time, and that's really sad. And like, you find out all these really sad things. And so it came from visiting a small town, and I was just really sad. And I was like, what would happen if someone moved here and they didn't like them? And that's what Eastern Standard was.
So dead husband trauma is grad school, and Olivia is just a grad student soldiering on, trying to get through. And I think it translates because people see that in our leading lady. Olivia is, according to the readers on Goodreads, she's compelling and relatable. She's strong-headed. She has a strong will. She's determined. She's fearless and persistent. And so is that like, were you pulling in a little bit of yourself there at the time, where you felt like grad school is really hard and I have to keep trudging, and you just put some beautiful red hair on her and were like, you go, sister, you go, and you handle that trauma? Or was there anything else that like inspired Olivia's character?
I've seen some of the reviews that are like, Olivia's really strong, I wouldn't have been able to do that, or like, things like that. And I think that that's not true. Like, I think for everyone who wrote those, like, that's probably not true. Like, if you were in this situation, you would probably do whatever you had to do just to get through it. Like, maybe you would have left right away, and that's getting through it for you. But I think it was just you moved here for something, and you can't go home because home isn't what it was. And so, like, even if you gave up, right, you'd still have to continue. And maybe that would be a whole different story, is like Olivia tried the small town, then she was back to New York, and that could have been a whole other book where it's like, you have sort of hit rock bottom. How are you pulling yourself up from them? But she didn't. She stayed, and maybe that's what people are like pulling on. Like, I wouldn't have been able to actually stay. As for if I put me in this book, maybe I did, in that, like, I think that maybe Olivia got a little bit of, I'm too far in this to turn around. Like, I don't know if I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning.
That hits so deep.
I think that that's how a lot of people feel in grad school, where it's like, if I turn back now, if I stop what I'm doing right now, am I closer to where I started or where I'm supposed to be going? And maybe that's why third year is the hardest, is because it's actually the middle. Most grad programs are 5 years, though I think the average is leaning towards 6 at this point, but 3 is typically your midpoint, where you have to start making decisions about what you want to do when you're done, and you have to start planning like what your life is going to look like after, and deciding, or even just feeling like, is that what I want to do? Do I want to live, do these next 2 years? And I think Olivia is just the grad student who was like, yep, I'm too far in this. Like, I have to see it through. I came here for a reason. What is that reason?
So what I hear you saying is that we all have an Olivia deep down inside of us, but it makes it a lot better if we could all have a Keating Whitaker on our side. So
yes,
where in the grad department, where can we get us one of those? Because, he's, sorry, love you to death, but he's the real reason why we're here. He's the doctor that you pray will make your house calls. And he's standing there at your front door with a backwards baseball cap on, and his hands in his pockets, and a stethoscope. And you're just clutching your pearls, just shivering and scared. And he holds you and makes everything better. And the fans say that he's beautiful and understanding, and I just want to pack him up and put him in my pocket. He's a total green flag, a swoon-worthy cinnamon roll. He's always been overlooked and the second option, but damn, he'd be my first choice. So, the question we all want to know, who is this blueprint? Where did this man come from?
Like, I wish I could point to someone, in a TV show or a movie that's just like, that's where I got Keating from. But I think he, is this combination of book boyfriends and things that I've, adopted over the years. But I guess talking about this book in the sense of grad school makes me shift that a little bit, where like, even the little things that I put into Keating, like the there's this bit that sticks out into my mind so clearly because I don't even know if it actually belongs in this story, but I just wanted to write it so badly because it symbolizes this like acknowledgement of cognitive load, which is when he goes to Olivia's house, or the house that she's renting from him, and brings her flowers, and she takes them, and they go in the kitchen, and he takes them back from her and is like, I'm so sorry, I should have cut those up for you and put them in the vase myself, that was my fault. And she's like, I don't think I've ever met anyone like you. And it's a thing that sticks out to me the most because that's probably, like, I don't know, my love language is acts of service. And like, if you take something off my plate, like, that's the clearest sign that you're like on my team, you're on my side, you're on those things. And like, it doesn't even have to be a big thing. It could be like, hey, you told me you needed this thing done, so I just did it for you. And like, some people don't like that because it's like, you thought I couldn't do it. But I think that at least in terms of Olivia or me as a graduate student, that's like the highest form of like, you see all the things that I have to do and you're thinking about how you can make my life easier. And I think that I see that in a lot of, not as many as I'd like, but I see it in a lot of book boyfriends or TV show boyfriends, right? Where like, they're just like absent-mindedly doing things for their partner. And I don't know, that's my favorite microtrope in anything. And I don't care if it doesn't fit, if you can fit it in there, even if it feels clunky, like, you should just do it because it's my favorite thing.
Yeah, we love a good acts of service. So that seems like that's a scene that's very quintessentially wit, but was there a scene that was your favorite of a wit scene to write? Like, your anthropomorphic hands were just like, click, 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 like we're eating this up.
Yeah. I think that you're going to like this answer. And I think that maybe we've talked about this before, and maybe I gave a slightly different answer before, but sitting here in this moment, my favorite scene is the doctor's office scene, because that's the one that I can see my anthropomorphic hands just typing for me. And I'm like, where is this going? And it's a good, like, I don't know, it happens all the time in books where like they throw in like a side character who's supposed to be kind of a distractor, like jealousy, like maybe there's like a little bit there. And not that we have any sort of a love triangle between Olivia, Wit, and somebody else and this and the way that people think about it, but we have this moment where like Wit is working with someone who has known him longer than Olivia, and maybe she just for a second is feeling like, oh, this is an interesting dynamic that I just walked into, and he quickly like shuts that down. And I think that that's a really fun scene, and it just so happens to happen in his office, and he is the town doctor. And so I think people think that there's a lot of tension in that scene that maybe should have been explored further, but I like it the way it is.
Yeah, so to those out there listening that are pretty disgruntled about how limited the scene was, maybe they want to know, will there be any bonus scenes, any bonus chapters that we'll get down the line?
Yeah, I think so. I think, especially for my other two books, I don't know. Oftentimes when I finish a book, I try to make sure that it's finished. Eastern Standard's ending actually got extended a little bit, or at least like slightly rewritten, because I felt like I wasn't done with it. And that happened like 2 weeks after I said I was done with it. But when I write books, I try to be done with them. I try to close them off. I'm not too big of a fan of interconnected standalones. I mean, I love to read them, but I don't think that I like the idea of writing them. And maybe if I sat down to do it, I would like that. But I think Wit and Olivia are two characters where I feel like I can see their life extend past the book. Like, I think that there's probably some good bonus content there featuring a doctor's office. I could see, like a trip to New York as a bonus scene, or I could see like, I don't know, maybe Eric gets a bonus scene. Everybody loves Eric, or like a Daisy, like on the phone or something, or maybe some like voicemails that didn't get written about in the book, or yeah, I think that there's lots of content to play around with.
Or maybe Olivia has to go to the doctor a different time for a different reason. And yes, you can make it up to us.
Yes, maybe she does. Maybe she does. You should go to the doctor once a year, everyone. I don't do that, but I hear you're supposed to.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially when your doctor looks like Keating Whitaker. Best to check in. Okay, so you're going to be busy writing us bonus scenes. You've launched a business and you're releasing a book tomorrow. So you've got, lots of time on your hands. And we're wondering what you're going to do with all that extra time. You've got some projects in the works, anything that we can get excited about?
Yes, I'm working on two things. A book we're going to try to have out June 1st. And it is another hockey romance. And it is a fake dating hockey player model romance called Model Behavior. And I think that's all I want to say about it for right now. I think it will have... I think after writing Eastern Standard, which is a really heavy, short, but really heavy book about figuring out who you are in places that you feel like you don't belong. And I just want to write something less heavy right now. And actually, I've been really fascinated with Dylan Sprouse and his wife, Barbara, and I think they're so cute. And so they're my inspiration for this book. And I'm very aware that Dylan Sprouse is not a hockey player, but I have no interest in writing about an actor. So here we are. So that's the first thing that I'm working on.
I imagine that this is not a problem, but an experience that indie authors have lots of times, which is like, I'm just getting started and, I maybe have a couple books out, but the scenes or the tropes or the feelings or like the events that you have are sort of endless, always flowing around in your mind. And how do I craft them to fit this story or these characters? And then you're like, oh, I've always been thinking about this really cute scene. And this is a great book that I can like plop it into. And so sometimes I feel like those scenes sort of manifest into something a little bit more, and to stifle them feels like it would be a shame. And I think there's a difference between like, okay, let me just spit the scene out. Let me put it on paper. Let me see what it looks like. Let me see if I like it. And then as you write it down and then you read it and you're like, okay, wait, no, I really kind of like this. Like, this is really cute. Like, I want somebody else to read this and tell me how cute this is. And then it just feels like almost criminal to be like, no, I'm working on something else. Let's close the Word doc. We'll come back to it later. It's like, no, you got to give them their due. Like, you already put them down to paper. Like, let them come to life a little bit. Let's see what happens. That's exactly what it is. It feels like some books have a life of their own, and those are the only books I'm interested in writing at this point in time, where like, I know that if I needed, in quotations, to write a book or something like that, I could. Like, you could give me a prompt and I could write a book. And I don't know if I'd enjoy that. Probably not. But, like, books that feel, like, in my head that are demanding to be told are different. And so, which is why the second thing that I'm working on is currently paused. But the second thing that I'm working on that I've already talked about on the Likewise pod with Sam and Isa is a cozy fall release book called Something's Witchy. And it is a witchy mystery romance. And it's about these two sisters who live in a small town, not Connor Bay, a new small town. And there's some people in town go missing. And so they have to bring in this detective to figure out what's happening. And the town has suspicions that the two sisters are witches. And so they're trying to sort of like pin all the disappearances on them. And the detective just tries to sort that out and gets particularly close to one of the sisters. So witchy, cozy, romance, mystery, all in one. It's just going to be so fun. As I'm incredibly excited about, I'm super in my hockey girl era right now. And so very excited about this model behavior situation. However, I was already very deep in the Something's Witchy Spotify, and I can't stop listening to it. And it doesn't really match the vibes much at all. I've tried to force it and it doesn't work. But I listened to that as I got in the shower this morning, as I drove to work, as I drove home from work, and as I worked on my computer. And so, maybe just to let you know in advance, that might seep a little bit into my edits because it's a whole other mood. And us editors out there, maybe we just need to have our own playlist so you don't let the mood of the book that the author wants seep in, because then you find a playlist that's really stinking good and it's been raining here and it just feels like it fits, and it fits for Something Witchy for sure, but it does not fit for the editing that I'm doing right now. But you did a very good job curating this playlist.
Yeah, my husband and I joke that it was like basically a playlist of music for him, because it's like I listen to a lot of the songs on the playlist, but like that's not my music. Like my music is a lot of like pop punk, like top 20s, like basically anything that's ever been on the radio, and then like some alt rock stuff from like early 2000s R&B. Like that's my jam. But like you get into like Fleetwood Mac, something that would be on the Daisy Jones and the Six soundtrack, and you kind of like, yeah, I've heard those songs, but it's not something I gravitate towards. But that is the vibe of Something Switchy. It's like sort of eerie and kind of and vibey and cozy, and like, I don't know, I want to say that playlist is like kind of haunting a little bit.
Mhm.
Like it's like, I don't know, it's just the feeling that you get makes you feel like it's a rainy day in October and you have that on in the background while you're trying to read, you know, a thriller mystery book.
Yeah, it's like when you finally get vacation time at work in December and you pop on that first Harry Potter movie and you're like, "Hoo-hoo,
Yeah.
I'm in it. Let's do it."
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, well, this is very exciting. Now that you are about to hook your claws, Sierra Spencer is coming for you with Eastern Standard fans. You're going to read it tomorrow. You're going to be obsessed, and you're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, like how do I get more of this?" Well, the good news is that you have 2 things coming this year, and there are already 2 books that are already out. You can go read Troped, and you can go read Developing Feelings after you've binged Eastern Standard. You can get them on Kindle Unlimited. You can get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books. And then you can just binge Sierra Spencer all day long. And then once you've done all the readings, you can go stalk her on social media for all the behind-the-scenes things at Sierra Spencer Books. I'm so excited. This is it. This is the eve of Eastern Standard. Let's go.
And maybe someone will tell me what I'm doing tomorrow. I don't know. That's to be determined.
We'll see. Maybe you'll get invited somewhere cool. Maybe not.
Yeah.
All right, Sarah. Well, we'll see you tomorrow.
Will you?
Maybe.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Lauren. Appreciate it. Maybe see you tomorrow.